Hey everybody, Sully Man here. So today we're going to finish up the OG Abel Merez t-shirt breakdown. You can see the first part, or first parts, which are actually the text was the first one. The second part was the background, which I'm toggling off and on now. And this last one we're going to cover the eagle and snake illustration. I'm not going to copy the eagle and snake illustration. I'm going to do my own version of a gorilla head. So just keep that in mind, but we're going to go ahead and kind of break down what he did to kind of create an illustration like this. So let's head over to that. So here's the gorilla head. This is almost to the final. I'm going to save a little bit of this to kind of show you guys. Parts of it are going to be sped up to keep the time down. But essentially with this, I'm going to teach you what I think at the beginning when I'm creating something like this. As far as forms and lighting and stuff like that. And then I'll show you a couple little techniques to achieve, this look. So let's get started. So here's the initial rough sketch. I'm going to go ahead and turn the opacity back up on this. So in this rough sketch, and it's fairly crude, but what I'm doing is I'm understanding what forms I'm dealing with. And then I also separate two values, which are my lightest light and my darkest darks. So anything that's in shadow I represent with this kind of blotched out red, and anything that's in light I just keep it white, like as if this was a piece of paper and you were sketching it out with a pencil. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that back down. So what I'm thinking before I have a sketch like this, my mindset is pretty much primitive shape. So let me hop into this for a second and kind of show you what this is built from. So I start with, a crude shape. So the head, I think of it kind of like a box or rectangle, depending on, if it's, stretching or being squished down. But it's kind of like a rectangle with some round edges. Think of this when you would draw those crude 3D shapes. I just haven't added the line in the background that represents, the all three dimensions, but that's kind of how you want to look at it. So this is kind of a crude looking rectangle with kind of rounded edges that kind of tapes towards when we start moving up. Then I add to that a second shape. So this is the same thing. It's still kind of like a cube that tapers at the highest point. This time I've actually added those background lines so you can kind of see what I'm talking about as far as the three-dimensional. And then from there, I add smaller and smaller shapes. So I start from one big shape, and then I move into smaller shapes. So now I add the brow line, which are essentially kind of three or two rectangles, kind of small, and they're stretched out. And I stack them on top of the red. So this would be, the brow line here, and the eyes would set somewhere in here as spheres. And then from there, I add kind of the muzzle. So I'm going to turn these off so you can see what I'm talking about. And this muzzle, they're kind of like pyramid shapes that taper and get flat as they touch the face. So the entire time I'm just keeping in mind, the very primitive forms. And then I add the teeth in, and the teeth are essentially the same thing. The teeth are kind of like cones. These canines are definitely kind of cone types. And then I just represent, the more squared out teeth as, a sheet of rectangles, and that's what basically builds this entire form. So let me get out of isolation mode. I'm going to go ahead and select all these. I'm going to go ahead and knock them down to about 30%, and then I'll do this live, and then we'll speed up the inking process, but I'll show you the tactics that I'm using to achieve that final look. So let me go ahead. I'm going to grab the black. So from this point, once I have, let's get rid of the initial rough sketch, but I sometimes when I don't understand, like let's say the gorilla head, I don't draw them all the time, so I would start with something primitive like this, and then I would do a second pass. Let's go ahead and use black. The second pass, I'm reevaluating the forms and refining them. So with the sketch in the background, there's like a dip down back here and things, and I would pick that up from reference. I would look at a photo of a gorilla and it's really kind of dissect what's going on. Like this cheekbone here kind of jets out. So these are all things I would add as I go along. So I'll leave that on so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. But as I go, so basically I tend to kind of just look at the form, This one I'll start with the brow line. Let me go ahead and bump up the line weight and just kind of sketch it out. It'd be really rough, and I'm just kind of feeling out the forms. I'd see how from this form it transitions as like kind of a dip, arcs down, and once I'm down I go straight back and then dip back down and move to the top of the head, and then in three-dimensional space it comes back, and this is perspective. So I'm not going to go into a full drawing tutorial. That'll be something I'll probably go and do later down the road, but this is just kind of get you started. So you can see I'm just roughing in these shapes. This is like a bulbous shape here, this whole thing. Just like this nose area would probably be like this kind of shape here, but I'll drop the nostrils in here, follow the form around, and overlapping definitely shows dimension. So like this, the muzzle of the mouth, this outer edge, would be on top of where the cheekbone is here. So this cheekbone, think of it like a box kind of sitting, and you have to keep with the perspective. It comes across here, jets in, just like this side juts in this direction. This kind of comes down like this, and when they meet, that's where you'll have a crease. That's kind of where the eyeball would be sitting, if you were to draw it in. And then we'll just wrap this meat of the muzzle around the teeth, and it would come down and connect with the bottom jaw. Come back down here and loop around, keeping with perspective. This direction and this direction are the same. So just like this over here is going to match over here, and you just got to pay attention to your perspective. So when the jaw comes out and down, it's coming out and down here, and then you cut across. So we'll just kind of block in this back area pretty quick. So, and you can see this muzzle here. I sometimes use lines to kind of show the direction that the form's going out. So we're wrapping around, the mouth. Refine the teeth if I need to. This is where I would go in, and if I wanted to do the individual teeth, I could sketch those out if I wanted to. Just kind of remember keeping in mind the form, paying attention and looking for overlaps. Like this tooth would be in the foreground, this would be the midground tooth, this would be the background tooth. You just kind of sketch them around until it looks right to you. And again, this stage is sloppy. We don't even have to worry so much about this stage. We're trying to stay pretty loose just so we understand what's going on with these forms. I can set that boundary there for that shape. So when I turn off that background and the underforms, you can see that we're working with something pretty nice. So the shapes are refined versus this, the crude version, very blocked in. So this second stage of the sketch, gets better and better. So from here, what I do is now I map out my values, and this is kind of a fun part. And you're really just kind of paying attention to where the light is. So I'm gonna draw this little light bulb here. Here's our light bulb. This light is shining down in 3D space, and it hits a surface here. So think of this little ellipse that I'm drawing laying down right here on this form, versus it would be this direction over here. You know what I mean? So let me go ahead and erase that. But anyways, what I essentially do is I just find a big blocky brush. I'll use the blob brush here, and so I've decided my lights from the top. So this entire side over here is going to be in shadow, so I just represent it by just slapping that in. I don't even have to be perfect about it. So I just pay attention to where the forms are. This back, see this small rectangle here? I know the light is going to hit this plane right here, but on this backside plane it's probably not going to touch, so I'll block that in. Just like down here in the eye socket, probably not going to touch. But once the jawbone starts jutting out this way, in this direction, it's going to touch here, but then as it drops back down, you're not going to see it there. So all this stuff you'll find in shadow. Even down here, I mean, you might have a lip come out, but we're just, again, super sloppy. We're just doing this to help our brain compute where is shadow and where is not shadow. Down in the nostril, there'll be some here. Down under this eye, We'll go ahead and block that in too. You know, down in the mouth, these teeth will be hit by light. All in this back jaw. Maybe over here a little bit, and then the tongue maybe pops out and gets hit with some light. I'll just knock all this into shadow. You know, and down here on this front side of the tooth, and maybe down towards the bottom of the teeth, and this side of the tooth over here. And get some of that in there. You know, and it's just you stick to that, and it'll be fairly convincing. So let me turn that off, and you can already see it's a pretty convincing looking gorilla. You know, and you can go crazy. You know, really kind of working, understanding that maybe a little bit there on the nose, and you know, stuff like that. So just pay attention to that. Keep very loose. And this and these couple stages is just really to help you trace better. You know, you're creating an original illustration, but you're doing all these preliminary test drawings to kind of let your brain really get wrapped around what these forms are and where you know, light and shadow are and where these lines are going to be. It just makes your life so much easier. So with this stuff here, I'm going to go ahead and grab it all. I'm going to knock it down in opacity, and I'm going to give you a quick little run over the tactics I used to create the final light art. So we'll knock this down to about 30%. So this is the final drawing, and I want you to notice a couple things. So I've got some hairs in here, but you'll notice, you know, there's no, I mean, you see this edge that runs back here on the gorilla head with some hair kind of knocked in there. But if you notice, right on these dark edges where the shadow meets the light on the form, you'll notice that the hairs just kind of dip off, and that's kind of a cross-hatching technique. That might be something you want to Google. And then in the shadow, what they refer to as bounce light. This is basically two lights are hitting the subject. A top light over here, and maybe a faint one back here that lights up some of these hairs that help pop the form a little bit more. So let me show you some of these techniques. So with this new layer on, what I'm essentially doing, let me get my brush. Let's go ahead and I'll just use the blob brush for now. So what I tend to do is when, you know, all this stuff here, let's switch to black, make sure we're at 100%. So let's just say we're working along and all this stuff's been, you know, darkened in. You know, trace it out, and it looks really nice. You know, I'm taking my time, and that's something when you get to the inking stage, you want to take your time. So let me just get this filled in pretty quick. Now, when it comes to the final touches on this, to show shading, it's a pretty simple way when you're doing it in illustration. Define your dark shadow area, define your light area, and then when you're cross-hatching, those are your halftone areas. Halftoning meaning it's not all the way in the light and it's not all the way in the shadow, so it'll be like a gray. So you represent that by a different couple ways. You can use, you know, stippling, so you can do little dots, and they pack in closer as you get to the shadow area. The further you away, the more spaced out they are. You know, and as you back away, your eye will automatically blend them. So I'm going to undo all these real fast, or just erase. So, and then the other technique you can do, like comic book artists, is by doing it by line. So you taper off and it gets fatter. So as it's in the light, the spacing's different. You know, as it gets closer to a crease, let's say this crease right here, I would pack my lines in a lot closer to each other. They would start small and then get fat. They'd taper off. That's where, you know, having a Wacom tablet and what have you really comes in to help a lot. So I can use pressure. No pressure at the beginning and a lot of pressure at the end. No pressure at the beginning, a lot of pressure at the end. So you can see it just kind of, the lines taper. These are super sloppy, but this is the technique being used. Basically, that's all I'm doing. So other than that, I'm tracing things out. So let's say with this brow line, I know this is going to be in shadow. You know, this crease over here probably hit some shadow. There's a crease here, we hit shadow. These nostrils, there's another good example. So let's define where the shadow starts and break it away from the light. And then we'll kind of create a halftone. And this halftone is being represented by these lines, these cross-hatched lines. So once I have that complete, I'm going to move on to the next one. Just keep in mind that you want to move along the form. If you can see how these are kind of curving, I'm not just staying straight the whole time. Like this nose, it's a form, it's sitting on something, so you want to show that with the line. So this one I'm going to curve down into the shadow. You can see how they're curving and tapering at the same time, and then maybe define them with a nice smooth line. So when I back away, you see that form. So follow the form. Just like you see this arrow right here, you want to do the same thing over here. Taper off, follow the form, wrap it around. Pack them in where they get close to each other, and then when they start not being so close form-wise, then you can start spacing out a little bit more. But you notice these little tapers start to create their own separation into the dark, and that's what creates the blending. So that's essentially what I'm doing. So from here on out, I'm going to go ahead and speed up the video and let you watch me inking that full design. Okay, so now that we have this all inked in and ready to go, we go into the final stage, which essentially is just adding in this second value. So you can see in this artwork it has the shadow area represented by black, the lightest light represented by white, and then the middle tone, or one of the middle tones, represented by this kind of gold color. So here I'm going to do the middle tone or value that we're working with here in gray. Just keep in mind, with the cross hatching or stippling or whatever it is that you do, that does create tone. So you're getting a lot of blends, and then with the second color, you're adding extra values in. So anyways, let's get started. I basically do the same thing. I just kind of group them. Where I see the form touching the light, I keep it white, and then anything that's not, I'm going to start knocking it into the second tone. So, down here, it's going to go into the shadow, and this gray is like a second value of shadow. So I just kind of roll through this, designating the areas that I think are shadow. Down in the nostril, not all the way out, but a portion of it. A little on this back side of the nostril probably. And remember, you can always erase, so it's not a huge deal. Put it in. If you don't think it looks right, get rid of it, start it again. The more you do it, the better your eye's going to be at, identifying what works and what doesn't. So we'll just keep moving along. I think all this would be in shadow. I think with this brow, the light would hit and maybe cast a little bit of shadow down here. And down here would probably dip into some shadow. The hair I'm not going to play around with. I'm going to leave that nice and bright white. So this back side of the tooth, I'll say, well, as it gets in and under the lip, I'm going to have some shadow there. Down where the, these two teeth meet. And then I'll say, let's say a portion of this will be in the gray, so I'll just kind of knock this all back into gray. Middle of the tongue, and then I'll stop it here. And keep in mind, this layer is behind the black, so I'm not worrying too much where everything ends up. So I'll say all this gets dipped into shadow. You can even do this backside of the teeth if that's, put it in, and if it doesn't look right, get rid of it. So put all this stuff back out, see how it looks. That's okay. I guess it'll pass. On other times I probably wouldn't be too happy with it, but this bottom portion of the lip, we can designate a plane there. Maybe some of this dipping back into shadow. Maybe a little bit of this cheekbone back here. Let's see here, maybe this scar dipping in. This side of the scar dipping in. Let's do amass some of this here. Let's just dip all that back into shadow. Okay. I think that's pretty good for the most part. And then basically it's just going in and doing my liner. You know, just start with smaller forms. Let's knock this down to about 0.5. You know, the more of these little forms I create, like these little bumps on the head, the more convincing this is going to look. So I'm kind of half-toning the half-tone now. So we'll come into here, do the same thing to each one of these forms. I'm treating, you know, like the bumps, because this isn't just one smooth shape. It's a bunch of different little circular blob forms that create the overall shape. So that's pretty much what I'm doing. So I'm going to continue on, and we'll go ahead and speed up, and you can watch the rest of this process. So that wraps up the first ever Pixel Mosh Pit design breakdown, going over the OG Abel Merez t-shirt design illustration combination thing. This is something I put together with, you know, all the tactics that we went over in these, you know, this 3-part series. You know, between the gorilla head illustration, the text, and, you know, the kind of flourishy backgrounds and stuff. So I figured you guys might like to kind of see something other than that actual design, and you know, what you can make yourself. I want to hate you guys for watching. I appreciate all the trolling in the comments section. But in all seriousness, really thank you guys. I can't thank you enough. Remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Any purchase at the Pixel Mosh Pit store goes a long way for all you guys that have already done that. Thank you so much for the support. It really does go a long way. Other than that, I just want to let you guys know I'm looking for submissions for the next design breakdown, so please remember, email me with any designs that you would like to see, if I can break it down for you and teach you, you know, the techniques and tactics to tackle those designs. You can submit those to pixelmoshpit@gmail.com. So you never know, yours might be the next design breakdown. So once again, you guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Sometimes you'll want to be urged to, like on this style, just use a